Okay, I want you to picture a specific sign. You've probably seen it 100 times. You're stopped at a red light, maybe at a busy intersection, you're just looking out the window and you see it. It's stapled to a telephone pole.
Hmm.
It's usually like bright yellow, maybe white, and it has this almost handwritten looking font, or sometimes it's literally just a Sharpie, and it says 4 words: "We buy ugly houses."
Or cash for homes. Any condition.
Exactly, those ones too. And I think for the longest time, I glossed over them. They were just part of the background noise of driving around town.
Yeah, they just blend in. It's like street-level advertising spam.
Yeah.
Right up there with lost dog flyers.
Yes, totally. But recently I started really noticing them, like they were everywhere. And then I go home, I turn on the TV, I'm flipping through channels late at night, and it's there too. But on TV, it's not ugly at all.
Oh, no. On TV, it's glamorous.
It's so glamorous. It's, sledgehammers crashing through drywall in slow motion. It's high fives and a brand new kitchen. It's these big, flashy profit margins flashing up on the screen.
It's really the two faces of the exact same coin, isn't it? The telephone pole is the acquisition, the gritty start, and the TV show.
Yeah.
That's the disposition, the glossy end result.
Right.
But what they're both selling, at the end of the day, is the concept of flipping.
And that is what we are really getting into today. We're going to unpack this whole phenomenon. But I want to be clear, we are not doing the HGTV version of this conversation.
No.
I don't really care about the backsplash tile or the staging furniture. I want to know about the machinery behind it. Because when you see those signs or you watch those shows, you are really just looking at the absolute tip of a massive economic iceberg.
That's a good way to put it.
We've got this whole stack of articles, data reports, economic analyses, and they paint this picture of flipping not just as a hobby or a side hustle, but as a massive financial engine.
And, I would add, an ethical minefield.
That too, a big one. And we're definitely going to get into the ethics of it, but we're also going to look at the hard numbers, the actual economics of buying, renovating, and reselling these assets. And we have to ask the big question here. Is this whole industry a vital service that is, saving our housing stock? Or is it more of a predatory machine that's just chewing up neighborhoods and spitting out unaffordable assets?
It's a huge question. And I think maybe before we get too deep into the weeds, we should probably clarify what we even mean by flipping in this specific context. Because, if you talk to a day trader on Wall Street, flipping means something completely different.
That's a great point. Yeah. In the broadest sense, flipping is it's buying any asset to sell it quickly for a profit. You can flip a vintage sneaker.
Right. You can flip a stock, a comic book.
A Taylor Swift ticket?
Exactly. It's an arbitrage play. You believe an asset is undervalued, or maybe you believe you can add value to it really quickly, and then you sell it on. But for this deep dive we're focusing in, we are looking pretty much exclusively at real estate.
Right. The whole process of acquiring a residential property, rehabbing it, or, as we'll find out, at least claiming to rehab it, and then reselling it for more.
That's the one.
And, I think the common perception is that this is kind of a niche thing. Maybe it's your uncle who's a contractor, and he does, like, one house a summer, or a couple of small-time investors here and there.
Yeah, cottage industry.
Exactly. But the data you pulled, man, it really shattered that illusion for me. The scale of this is, well, it's industrial.
It is absolutely industrial. There's no other word for it. If we look at some of the peak numbers provided in the research, specifically going back to 2017, house flipping in the U.S. hit an 11-year high. We're talking about 207,088 condos and single-family houses flipped in a single year.
Okay, let's just pause on that number for a second. 207,000, that's a lot of drywall. That is a lot of paint.
It's a staggering amount of inventory being turned over. And to give you some context for that number, that 207,000 represented nearly 6% of all single-family property sales that year.
Wait a minute, 6%. 6% sounds like a small number if you just say 6. But when you think about the millions and millions of real estate transactions that happen every year, that's wild. It means if I drive down a random street with, say, 20 for sale signs.
Statistically, at least one of them, probably more, is a flip.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's really why this matters so much. Because when you have an activity that accounts for that much of the total market, it stops being a side hustle.
Hmm.
It starts being a market mover.
It's not just following the trends, it's making the trends.
It is. It impacts prices for everyone. It impacts the availability of housing stock. It fundamentally impacts the character of community.
And that's the tension, right? That's the central conflict we're going to keep coming back to in this entire deep dive. On one hand, you have this argument that these people are, well, they're heroes.
Mm-hmm.
They are taking the houses that nobody wants, the ugly houses from the telephone pole sign, and they're turning them back into livable, beautiful homes. They are, in a sense, recycling the American housing stock.
That's the rejuvenation argument. And to be fair, it has merit. We'll definitely get into that side of it.
But then you have the complete other side, the side that says this is predatory, that it's just a way to artificially inflate prices, to create dangerous real estate bubbles, and ultimately to displace the people who have lived in these neighborhoods for decades.
The exploitation argument. And honestly, the data we have here, it supports both sides. It really depends on how a flip is executed and why. It's not a binary, good or bad. It's a whole spectrum.
So let's start with the engine that drives all of this. Let's start with the money, the economics of the flip. Because on the surface, the business model seems incredibly simple.
Deceptively simple.
Yeah, buy low, fix it up, sell high. It's the classic buy low, sell high logic, just applied to bricks and mortar.
It sounds simple, and it is in principle. But the real nuance, the secret sauce, is in where. Where do you buy low? And where can you sell high? Because real estate, as they say, is local. But capital is global, it's mobile.
This was one of the most interesting threads in the reading for me. This idea that flipping, it follows a migration pattern. It's almost like watching a weather map.
Yeah.
Or a virus spreading. It moves to wherever the conditions are most favorable for growth.
Exactly. And to really understand the current state of flipping, where it's happening now, you have to look at the history of where that capital has traveled over the last couple of decades. The sources all point to what they call the California effect in the 2000s as the perfect case study.
The bubble years.
The bubble years, yeah. Think back to, say, 2005, 2006 in California. You had this intense economic pressure cooker. You had high-paying jobs, high wages, but just astronomically high real estate prices. It was becoming functionally impossible for a normal person to buy a home in the Bay Area or Los Angeles.
So what do people do when they can't afford to live where they work?
They move.
They move.
They migrate. And crucially, they take their equity with them. So you saw this massive exodus of Californians moving to cheaper states. The data points to Arizona, Nevada, Texas, Oregon, Washington as the main destinations.
I remember this so clearly. I remember reading all those stories about people selling like a total teardown shack in San Jose for $1 million and then going and buying a literal mansion in Phoenix.
Right. But think about the second-order effects of that. Think about the economics of that single transaction multiplied by thousands. You have this wave of new buyers arriving in, say, Phoenix, with pockets absolutely full of California cash. What happens to the housing market in Phoenix?
Demand goes through the roof, supply is static, so prices have to spike.
Prices spike dramatically.
Yeah.
And who notices when prices start to spike?
The flippers.
Investors, flippers. They see the heat map turning red in a new city and they swarm to it. So that migration of people directly caused this wave of gentrification in these new locations. The Las Vegas Valley, the suburbs of Phoenix, they became the new hotspots, the new ground zero.
It's like a contagion then.
Yeah.
The high price fever in California infected the neighboring states.
Contagion is actually a very, very apt term for it. And it's important because it illustrates that flipping isn't just a local issue. You can't just look at your local city council and blame them for rising prices. It's often driven by these huge macroeconomic forces happening thousands of miles away.
Okay, here's where the plot twists a bit. Because if you asked me today, or, in the last couple of years where the hot flipping markets are, I'd probably still guess the Sun Belt. I guess Austin or Miami, maybe Phoenix is still hot.
That would be the intuitive guess, for sure.
But the data we have from 2020 and onward shows this massive shift. The capital, it seems, got bored of the Sun Belt, or maybe it just got priced out of the Sun Belt, and it moved to the Midwest, the Rust Belt.
The Great Lakes region, specifically. This was the most fascinating pivot in all the data. We're talking about Greater Cleveland, Akron, Pittsburgh, and even South Bend, Indiana.
Akron, Ohio, the new real estate frontier. It sounds so counterintuitive.
It does sound counterintuitive until you pull up the spreadsheet. And then it makes perfect, cold, hard sense. It is purely a margin play.
Okay, walk me through the math. Why Akron? What's the play?
Let's look at the 2019 numbers that were provided in our source stack. In these Midwest markets, the median flip home was purchased for roughly $60,000.
$60,000. I mean, let's just sit with that for a second. In San Francisco, you can't buy a parking spot for 60 grand. In parts of Cleveland, that gets you a whole house.
It gets you a whole house. Now, it might need a lot of work. It's not going to be pretty. It might be in a neighborhood that has seen much, much better days. But the entry price, your initial capital outlay, is incredibly low.
Okay, so that's the buy low part. What about the sell high?
Right. So now look at the exit price. They were selling those same renovated homes for a median price of $124,000.
Okay, let me do the quick back of the napkin math here. You buy for 60, you sell for 124. That is a $64,000 gross spread. That's more than 100% markup on your initial purchase price.
Exactly. Now, obviously, you've got your renovation costs in there. You have holding costs, taxes, realtor fees. But let's say you spend a generous $30,000 on the rehab. You are still clearing a massive profit relative to your initial investment. The ROI is huge.
And compared to a market like LA.
Oh, it's a completely different world. In LA, you might have to spend $800,000 just to buy a teardown, and maybe you spend another $200,000 fixing it and sell it for $1.1 million. The raw dollar amount of profit is higher, maybe, but the risk you took on is astronomical. Your capital is tied up, and the percentage return is often much, much thinner.
Plus, the competition must be insane in those markets.
Fierce. Everyone is looking for a deal. But in the Midwest, in 2019, 2020, the market inefficiencies were still there. There was still gold in those hills, so to speak.
So you literally have investment advisors, people in suits, in high-rise offices in Century City, telling their California-based investors, don't buy a rental in your backyard, send your money to northeastern Ohio.
That's exactly what was happening. It's the financialization of the Rust Belt. These cities that were hit so hard by deindustrialization that have this huge surplus of cheap, aging housing stock suddenly became these unlikely gold mines for remote capital.
It's just wild to think about. You have a guy in Santa Monica sitting by his pool owning a portfolio of 3 or 4 homes in Akron that he's probably never even stepped foot in.
And this isn't just a U.S. phenomenon either. The sources touched on this briefly, but it's important to note that this buy, rehab, resell model is growing rapidly in Europe too. You have large real estate firms and private equity buying up properties in places like Berlin and Lisbon doing the exact same thing.
So it's a global shift in how we view housing. It's moving away from just shelter and more towards just an asset class to be optimized, like a stock or a bond.
That's the perfect way to describe it.
Which brings us right back to the impact on the ground. Because look, if I'm living in Akron and my neighborhood has a bunch of boarded up, derelict houses, and suddenly all this capital flows in from California and fixes them up, isn't that a good thing? Let's play devil's advocate for a minute here. Let's talk about the good.
This is the strongest, most compelling argument for the flipping industry. The idea of gentrification as restoration.
Right, because nobody wants to live next to a zombie house, a place with broken windows and weeds up to your waist.
Of course not. And there's a very specific sociological theory that comes up in the literature here that explains why. It's called the broken windows theory.
Right. I've heard this used in policing contexts, crack down on the small stuff like turnstile jumpers to prevent bigger crimes from happening. But how does it apply to real estate?
The underlying logic is identical. The theory, which dates back to social scientists Wilson and Kelling in the 80s, suggests that visible signs of disorder and neglect act as a powerful signal to the community.
What kind of signal?
A broken window that goes unfixed. Or in this context, a house with peeling paint, knee-high grass, and a collapsing front porch that signals to everyone, both law-abiding citizens and criminal elements, that no one cares about this place.
It signals a lack of surveillance, a lack of ownership, a power vacuum.
Exactly. It sends a message that says, the social contract is broken here, the rules don't apply.
Yeah.
And that environment is a magnet for vandalism, for squatting, for drug use. It creates this vicious spiral of decline.
So the flipper in this narrative comes in as the interrupter of that spiral, the circuit breaker.
In theory, yes. That's the idea. They come in, they fix the broken window, they paint the siding, they hire a landscaper to cut the grass, they install a motion sensor light on the porch. Suddenly, the signal changes completely.
The signal now says, someone is watching. Someone has invested here. This property has value.
Precisely. And that can create a virtuous cycle. Well, the criminal element might move on because the environment is no longer permissive. The neighbors across the street see the improvement and they feel a renewed sense of pride. Or maybe it's just peer pressure and they finally decide to paint their own fences. The whole block gets a lift.
And then there's the money side of it for the city itself. I have to imagine the local government is basically rolling out the red carpet for these
Yes,
investors.
for the most part, yes. Absolutely. Because cities, especially struggling ones, run on property taxes. A house that's assessed at $60,000 pays very little in tax revenue. That same house, after a flip, now assessed at $124,000, pays more than double.
That's more money for schools, for roads, for the fire department.
Exactly. And don't forget the sales tax bump during the renovation itself. I mean, if you're doing a full gut rehab on a house, you're buying thousands of dollars of lumber, drywall, copper pipes, new appliances. You're hiring local electricians and plumbers and roofers.
It's a mini stimulus package for the local economy.
It absolutely is. There's no denying that. When a flip is done right, and that's the key qualifier, when it's done right, meaning they actually fix the structural issues and restore the home to the market in a responsible way, it can be a massive net positive for a dying neighborhood. It brings housing stock back online that might otherwise be condemned and demolished.
When it's done right. That feels like the key phrase in this whole conversation, doesn't it?
It is.
Because that brings us directly to the dark side. The bad. The bad. Because we can talk about the neighbor effect. You know, my house value goes up because your newly renovated house value went up. That sounds great. But there is a cost to that. If values on my street keep going up and up and up, eventually they go up too much for some people.
This is where we collide head-on with the issue of displacement. It's the unavoidable flip side of gentrification.
Right. So let's say I've lived in my house for 30 years. I bought it for nothing back in the 80s. Maybe I'm on a fixed income now. I'm retired. I'm not planning on selling my house, ever. But suddenly, 3 flippers come onto my block, and the property values just skyrocket.
Your property tax assessment skyrockets right along with them.
Yeah.
Your tax bill could double or triple in just a few years. And if you're on a fixed income and you can't afford that new massive tax bill,
Yeah.
you are forced to sell.
You're taxed out of your own home.
You are forced to leave the community you may have helped build and lived in your entire life. And if you're a renter, it's even faster and more brutal.
Oh, yeah.
The landlord sees the property values going up all around, sees what the flipped houses are renting for, and says, why on earth am I charging $800 a month when the new market comps say I can get $1,500?
And your lease is up, and you get a notice. Your rent is doubling. Pay up or get out.
Exactly. So while the neighborhood objectively looks nicer, better paint jobs, new windows, manicured lawns, the community that actually lived there, the social fabric, is completely erased. The flipping activity accelerates gentrification to a speed that existing residents simply cannot adapt to.
And then there's the quality issue, the quality of the work itself. We absolutely have to talk about the lipstick flip.
Oh, the lipstick flip. It's such a wonderfully evocative term.
It really is. It paints the perfect picture, doesn't it?
A lipstick flip is, in essence, putting lipstick on a pig. It's a renovation that is purely cosmetic, designed to dazzle the buyer's eye while ignoring, or in some cases actively hiding, the serious, expensive structural rot underneath.
This is what I was alluding to earlier with the millennial gray laminate floors and the generic fixtures. You walk into one of these places and everything smells like fresh paint. It looks like an Instagram post. But what is going on behind the drywall?
That's the million-dollar question. And the problem is, the flipper's primary motivation is speed. Every single day they hold that property, they're losing money on interest payments, insurance, taxes, utilities. They want to get in and get out as fast as possible.
And fixing a cracked foundation is slow and expensive.
And, most importantly, invisible. No buyer walks into an open house and says, ooh, honey, look at that sexy new foundation repair.
Right. No, they say, look at that beautiful subway tile backsplash. Or, wow, an open concept.
Exactly. So the flipper spends all their money on the tile, the paint, the new stainless steel appliances, the fixtures, the lipstick, and they just ignore the cast iron plumbing from 1950 that's about to burst, or the old knob and tube wiring that's a genuine fire hazard.
The sources we looked at mentioned critics saying that flippers often use these very specific, expensive-looking, minimalist designs precisely to distract from the lack of structural integrity. It's basically architectural sleight of hand.
It is. They create a wow factor with surface-level stuff to keep you from looking too closely at the things that actually matter for the health and safety of the home. And in Europe, the sources point to an even more specific and maybe more insidious type of structural degradation. It's not just about bad repairs. It's about fundamentally changing the layout of homes for the worse.
This is the chopping up of apartments.
Yes. In many older European cities, you have these beautiful, large, historic apartments. They're perfect for a family. But a flipper or an investor looks at that space,
Mm.
and they don't see a family home. They see inefficiency. They see unmonetized square footage.
So what do?
They buy the large family apartment, and they throw up a bunch of new walls and chop it into 3 tiny micro apartments.
Because 3 tiny rents add up to more than 1 big rent. It's just a math problem for them.
Correct. But the long-term cost to the city is that you systematically destroy the family-sized housing stock. You turn a neighborhood that was once full of families into a neighborhood of transients, students, and short-term renters. You change the demographic fabric of a place permanently just to squeeze out a few more percentage points of annual yield.
It's incredibly cynical. But, I also want to be fair to the flippers for a second, or at least the honest ones who are trying to do good work, because the sources made it very, very clear. This is not easy money. We see the big profit numbers on TV, but we don't always see the spectacular losses.
No, absolutely not. It's a high-risk, high-stress game. The failure rate is significant. The sources we read listed a top 10 risk factors list, and it's basically a catalog of nightmares for any property owner.
What was the one that stood out to you on that list?
For me, it was the concept of the demo discovery.
That sounds like the title of a horror movie.
For the investor, it feels like one. It's that moment when you start demolition. You take that sledgehammer to the kitchen wall because you want to create that open concept we talked about, and you find something you absolutely did not budget for.
Like what? Termites.
Termites, black mold hiding behind the drywall, a load-bearing wall that your plans said you could remove, but it turns out it's the only thing holding up the second floor. Or maybe you find out the previous owner did a bunch of unpermitted electrical work, and it's a complete rat's nest of fire hazards.
And just like that, your $30,000 renovation budget is now $60,000 or more.
And your 3-month timeline just doubled. And while you're scrambling to deal with that, you're also dealing with the other huge risk factor, the human element, specifically finding dependable contractors.
Oh, man. Anyone who has ever just tried to do a simple kitchen remodel knows this pain intimately.
Now imagine doing it remotely. Imagine you're that investor we talked about, sitting in California trying to manage a contractor in Akron, Ohio. The contractor knows you aren't there to check on the progress. Maybe he doesn't show up for a week. Maybe he's juggling 3 other jobs. Maybe a bunch of expensive copper piping just walks off the job site.
So you're just bleeding money every single day.
You're bleeding money. Running out of funds is a huge, huge risk. If you run out of cash halfway through a flip, you are dead in the water. You can't sell a half-gutted house for a profit. You're stuck. You might lose everything.
So it's high risk, high reward. That's the game. But that's the legal version of the game. That's the, I tried my best, but the market turned against me version. Now we need to move to the next segment. The part that I have to say really made my blood boil when I was reading the notes. We need to talk about the ugly.
This is where we leave the world of legitimate, if risky, investment strategies, and we enter the world of actual crime.
Because there are people out there who aren't just bad at flipping or cutting corners to save a buck. They are actively and systematically preying on people.
Predatory behavior. And it often starts with the acquisition. We talked about those yellow signs, "We buy ugly houses." But the tactics used to actually get the owners of those houses to sell can be incredibly manipulative.
Let's talk about this concept of posing. What is that?
Posing is a tactic where a corporate entity, a big real estate firm or a professional investment group, disguises itself as a sympathetic, everyday individual.
So, you get a letter in the mail, and it looks handwritten. Maybe it's on, cute stationery. And it says something like, "Hi, I'm Jen. My husband and I are looking for our first home to raise our baby in. We just love your street. Please call us if you're thinking of selling."
Right. And you, the homeowner, you think, "Oh, how sweet. Jen needs a house for her baby."
Yeah.
But Jen is a persona. Jen isn't real. Jen is a call center in another state. Jen is a shell company owned by a private equity firm.
That is so dark.
It's a psychological tactic. It's designed to lower your defenses. If you know you're negotiating with a sharp-suited professional shark, you keep your guard up. You hire a lawyer. You get your own appraisal. If you think you're helping a nice young couple start their family, you might accept a lower price out of kindness. You might be more flexible on the terms.
And who are they targeting with these letters? They're not just sending them out randomly, are they?
No, the targeting is very precise. The sources are very specific about this. They target the vulnerable. They pull public records to find the elderly who have owned their homes for a long time, who might be looking to downsize and have no idea what the current market value is.
Okay.
They target people who are in foreclosure or deep in debt. They target owners of properties with what the industry calls stigmas.
Stigmas. What does that mean?
It could be anything that makes a property hard to sell on the open market. A serious bug infestation, a hoarding situation, a house where a violent crime occurred, or even just a house with notoriously bad neighbors. They find owners who are embarrassed or desperate or just completely overwhelmed, and they offer them what seems like an easy way out.
We'll pay cash, we can close in 7 days, no inspections, no hassle.
And for someone who is drowning in debt or shame, that sounds like a lifeline.
But it's not.
It's an anchor, because the offer they make is almost always pennies on the dollar. They are stripping the equity from the people who need it the most under the guise of helping them.
But even that, it's still technically legal, right? I mean, it's unethical, it's slimy, but buying low isn't a crime in itself?
Correct. It exists in a moral gray area,
Yeah.
but illegal property flipping is a crime. And the sources we reviewed and law enforcement distinguish this very, very clearly from just being a shrewd negotiator.
Okay, so this is the real criminal stuff. What makes a flip illegal?
In a word, fraud. The mechanism here is completely different. In a legal flip, you buy a property, you add value through improvements, or you wait for the market to rise, and then you sell. In an illegal flip, the improvement is a lie, and the value is a complete fabrication.
Okay, so walk us through the scheme. How do you pull something like this off?
All right, step one, the criminal entity buys a property, usually a very distressed one, a real wreck. Let's say they buy it for $100,000.
Okay.
Step two, they make zero, and I mean zero, meaningful improvements. They might sweep the floor, they might put up a new house number to make it look like something happened, but they do nothing of actual value.
Got it.
Step three is the crime itself. They immediately put it back on the market, sometimes within days or even hours, and resell it for, say, $200,000.
But wait, who would buy a $100,000 house for $200,000? Wouldn't the buyer, see that it's a total dump?
They would, unless the buyer is in on the scheme. Or, more commonly, the real victim isn't the buyer, it's the bank. The scheme requires collusion. You can't do it alone. You need a corrupt appraiser.
Ah, the appraiser is the gatekeeper.
The appraiser is the linchpin. The bank relies on the professional appraiser to tell them, yes, this house is indeed worth $200,000 and is adequate collateral for the loan. So the corrupt appraiser falsifies the report. They might use comparable sales from a totally different, much nicer neighborhood. They might lie about the square footage or the condition of the property.
So the bank's underwriting department gets the paperwork. It all looks legitimate, they say, looks good. And they approve the loan and wire the $200,000?
Exactly. The flipper gets the $200,000, pays off the corrupt appraiser, and walks away with a huge fraudulent profit. The buyer, who is often a straw buyer, who is paid a small fee to let the criminals use their good credit score, never intends to make a single mortgage payment.
And that happens.
The mortgage immediately goes into default. The bank has to foreclose. And when the bank finally takes possession of the house and goes to sell it to recoup their money, they realize, wait a minute, this is a pile of rubble that's only worth $100,000. The bank is forced to take the massive loss.
It's literally bank robbery with paperwork instead of a gun.
That's a perfect way to put it. And when you multiply this by thousands and thousands of transactions across the country, you get systemic risk. You get bubbles.
And this brings us to the big one, the 2008 connection. Because I think people remember The Big Short. They remember the term subprime. But I don't think everyone fully realizes how central this kind of flipping was to the entire crash.
It was the gasoline on the fire, an accelerant.
How so? What was the mechanism?
Well, think about the incentives at the time. In the years leading up to 2008, lending standards were, well, they were basically non-existent. You had the infamous no income, no job, no assets loans, the NINJ loans. You could get a mortgage with practically zero money down.
So you didn't need to be a millionaire real estate tycoon to be a speculator anymore. You just needed a pulse and a decent credit score.
Exactly. So you had taxi drivers, strippers, school teachers, people with absolutely no background in real estate, buying 3, 4, 5 houses at a time, not to live in, not even to rent out, just to flip.
They were betting on the market. They assumed prices would just go up forever.
It was pure, unadulterated speculation. They were buying with the sole intent of reselling in a month or two for profit. And this created this massive artificial demand for housing. Demand radically outstrips supply. And what happens then? Prices skyrocketed.
Which in turn drew in even more flippers who saw the easy money being made.
It was a feedback loop, an inflationary spiral. But it was a house of cards, because the underlying value just wasn't theirs, all built on cheap debt. And the moment the prices stopped rising, the moment the music stopped. Everyone tried to sell at once,
And there were no buyers left, just sellers.
and prices collapsed. But the debt, the mortgages remained. And because the banks had lent 100% of the inflated value, or in some cases even more, they were left holding trillions of dollars in toxic assets. The flipping frenzy was a major, major component of what became the global financial crisis.
It's actually terrifying to think that a bunch of people slapping gray paint on houses in Florida and Nevada helped take down an institution like Lehman Brothers.
It just shows how interconnected and fragile the whole system can be.
So surely we learned our lesson from that, right? This brings us to segment 5, regulation. What did the government do to stop this from ever happening again?
Well, they tried. The FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, has always been wary of this stuff. They insure mortgages against default, so they are the ones on the hook financially when these fraud schemes go south.
So they have skin in the game.
A lot of skin in the game. So back in 2003, they already had rules about this. But in 2006, right as the bubble was really peaking, they introduced a very specific rule designed to stop predatory flipping in its tracks. It was called the 90-day rule.
Okay, the 90-day rule, how did that work?
It was very simple and very effective. If you bought a house, you were prohibited from reselling it to a buyer using an FHA-insured mortgage for at least 90 days.
Why 90 days? What's magical about 3 months?
It stops the churn. The illegal fraud schemes we just talked about, the buy at noon, sell at 1 p.m. scams, those rely on incredible speed. By forcing the investor to actually hold the property for 90 days, you force them to incur real costs.
Holding costs.
Exactly. Mortgage payments, insurance, taxes, maintenance, market risk. It makes the quick and dirty scam unprofitable and much riskier.
So it's basically a speed bump for the market.
It's a fantastic speed bump. And it worked until, ironically, it became a problem.
Wait, how did a rule that stopped fraud become a problem?
Because of the crash it was meant to prevent. By 2010, the housing market was a corpse. Foreclosures were everywhere. Banks were drowning in this bad inventory they couldn't get rid of. The government needed someone, anyone, to come in and start buying up these foreclosed homes to stabilize the market.
They needed the flippers.
They needed the flippers. But the flippers, the legitimate ones, were saying, hey, we can't buy these thousands of foreclosures because the 90-day rule ties up our capital for too long. We need to be able to move fast to make the business model work.
Wow. So the government was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do you keep the rule that stops fraud, or do you get rid of it to save the entire market from collapsing further?
And they chose the market. In 2010, the FHA issued a waiver that greatly relaxed and for a period of time essentially eliminated the 90-day requirement.
They took down the speed bump to get traffic moving again, even if some of that traffic was dangerous.
That's the perfect analogy. It was a calculated risk. They hoped that other newer oversight mechanisms like stricter appraisal standards and smarter bank algorithms would catch the fraud this time. And to be fair, we do have things now like US PAPE, which are the professional appraisal standards, and Fannie Mae has these collateral underwriter programs that automatically flag suspicious rapid flips. But the fundamental tension remains. Regulation slows down market, deregulation invites fraud.
It's a pendulum that just keeps swinging back and forth.
Always.
Now, I want to pivot from government regulation to something that I think is, in some ways, just as powerful in shaping this industry, and that's the culture, the media.
Oh, this is huge. You can't understand modern flipping without talking about TV.
Right, because as we said, after the 2008 crash, flipping was a dirty word. If you called someone a flipper, it was an insult. You were basically calling them a shark, a scammer, a person who helped cause the recession.
It was a derogatory term. It was associated with financial ruin and greed.
But then
Yeah.
something shifted. The reputation got laundered. And I think we can trace it back to a specific network and a specific genre of television.
Reality TV, HGTV, A&E, Bravo.
And the sources mention a really specific moment in July 2012. CNBC, which is a serious business news network, greenlit multiple new pilots, all focused on house flipping.
That was the signal. That was the moment the industry came out of the penalty box. When a network like CNBC says this is legitimate business content, they are re-legitimizing the entire practice for the public. They are saying this is a valid business again.
And then the floodgates just opened. Flip or flop. Flip this house. Property Ladder. Masters of Flip. Then the crazier ones like zombie house flipping, flipping Vegas, flipping Boston.
It's an endless list. But think about what these shows actually do psychologically. They gamify housing.
They absolutely do. Every single episode has the exact same formulaic structure. The brave, telegenic hero buys the ugliest house on the block. They encounter a scary, unexpected problem. Oh no, the budget. which usually happens right before a commercial break.
Of course.
They heroically solve it. They stage the house with beautiful furniture. And then the payoff,
Yeah.
the big reveal.
And the graphic on the screen. Purchase price, $6. Renovation cost, 36 city. Total profit, $50,000. And then everyone high fives and the credits roll.
It trains us as viewers to view the house solely as a profit center. It trains us to root for the highest possible sale price.
Exactly. You're sitting there on your couch and you are actively cheering for the house to sell for the highest number imaginable. You are cheering for housing inflation in your city. You never stop to ask, wait, who can actually afford that house now? Or what does this do to the property taxes of the neighbors? You're just happy that the nice couple on TV made their money.
And it completely, totally glosses over the lipstick issue we talked about. We are trained by these shows to applaud the gray floors and the subway tile and the barn doors. That specific visual language, the HGTV aesthetic, becomes the new standard for what value looks like.
And we don't ask if they properly replaced the 80-year-old wiring. We just ask if they successfully opened up the floor plan.
It creates a whole generation of buyers who value aesthetics over mechanics. And maybe even more dangerously, it creates a generation of amateur flippers who watch these shows and think, hey, I can do that. It looks so easy.
And then they go out, they get a hard money loan, they buy a house in Akron, and they get absolutely crushed by that demo discovery.
Right. The media narrative just fuels the cycle. It keeps the fresh, naive capital flowing into the system, which helps keep the prices up, which keeps the pros in business.
It's a self-perpetuating machine.
So, after all of this, where does this leave us? We've looked at the economics, the incredible 100% margins in the Midwest. We've looked at the good, the real value of fixing broken windows and saving homes. We've looked at the bad and the ugly, the fraud, the displacement, and the systemic risk to our economy.
I think we're left with a spectrum. That really is the most important takeaway for anyone listening. Flipping isn't inherently evil, and it isn't inherently good. It is a tool. It is a mechanism for capital allocation in the housing market.
In the hands of a responsible local contractor in Cleveland who really cares about the neighborhood, who buys a rot-infested shell of a house and genuinely turns it back into a safe, beautiful family home, that's a win for everyone.
That is rejuvenation. That is saving a dying asset and adding value to a community.
But in the hands of a remote speculator who has never set foot in the state, or a criminal fraudster, or a lipstick artist just looking for a quick buck.
It is a predatory practice. It extracts wealth from the community, it degrades the long-term quality of the housing stock, and it fuels instability for everyone.
It creates wealth for investors, there's no doubt. It creates tax revenue for struggling cities. But it so often comes at the direct expense of long-term residents and overall affordability.
And that tension isn't going away. I mean, as long as housing in our society is viewed as an investment vehicle, as one of the primary ways to build wealth, rather than just as a place to sleep, flipping is going to be a central and controversial part of the American economy.
So here's the question I really want to leave you with today. We all love a good before and after picture. It's satisfying, it triggers something in our brains that loves order from chaos. But when does a smart investment cross that invisible line and become predatory behavior?
And I would add this final thought to that. The next time you see that for sale sign on a newly renovated home, the one with the perfect fresh sod and the trendy modern font, ask yourself about the invisible costs. Who lived in that house before? Why did they have to leave? And who is really truly paying for that profit margin you see on TV? Is it the new buyer? Is it the bank? Or is it the neighborhood itself?
Something to think about the next time you drive past one of those little yellow "We Buy Ugly Houses" signs. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.